Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you the first of a three-part topic. Continuing with how the Dragon Ball franchise influenced my decision to create the terminology of the channel category, another tricky part about being a fan of the franchise is how some fans have very different interpretations of how to categorize the storylines within the franchise. Whether it be different ideas of where certain storylines begin and end, or even what term to use for the storylines, the most common of these debates being saga, which is used by Funimation and many English-speaking fans, versus arc, which, based on my observations, is mostly used by fans of the subversion. The saga versus arc debate in particular has had its share of moments where I've seen people accuse saga as a misnomer, insisting that the whole franchise should be called a saga and that arc should be used for the specific storylines. If you've seen my introduction video for terminology of the channel, you may recall how I mentioned that the co-creator of Phineas and Ferb, Dan Povenmire, made a very valid point about how language is a fluid concept that changes and adapts over time. What a word that may have had one meaning in the past can gain new meanings or extra meanings over the course of history. And for me, that's what saga is, an example of a word that used to mean a whole franchise overall, but now can refer to specific storylines within a franchise. And to be fair, Funimation is not the only company that's used saga as a specific storyline rather than a whole franchise. Marvel has done this as well, such as the infamous Clone Saga from Spider-Man or the Phoenix Saga from X-Men. So for me personally, saga is a perfectly valid term to refer to the storylines. If people want to call them arcs, that's cool. I won't antagonize them over that. And my purpose for this video and its upcoming two parts is to merely give viewers a heads up of what terms they can expect for the storylines of the Dragon Ball franchise on this channel. For me, I divide the storylines of the Dragon Ball franchise into three categories: saga, sub-saga, and arc. For me, saga refers to the big storylines of the franchise. Sub-saga is what I use to refer to the collective grouping of episodes that Funimation would release volumes of home releases and group them together in a box set. Like what they would call the Great Saiyaman Saga, I call the Great Saiyaman Sub-Saga. And then for me, arc I use as a smaller set of episodes too. Because for me, I've always associated arc more as a smaller thing rather than a larger scaled story. So to give you a brief example of how I would use these terms, I'll give you an example. For me, the Otherworld Tournament arc is filler at the start of the Great Saiyaman Sub-Saga, which is at the start of the Buu Saga. I hope that example was very helpful, and I do intend to go into greater detail with regards to Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. Part 2 will be dedicated to how I categorize Dragon Ball's storylines, the classic series, and then Part 3 is how I'll divide up Dragon Ball Z. As for Dragon Ball GT, since that's a shorter series, I'll actually tell you how I divvy up Dragon Ball GT right here in this video. To me, Dragon Ball GT has three sagas: the Baby Saga, the Super 17 Saga, and the Shadow Dragon Saga. Those first 16 episodes, which, at least when they were released in the United States, they were called the Lost episodes, and later on they were called the Black Star Dragon Ball Saga. For me, they're just part of the Baby Saga. I count the first 40 episodes of GT as part of the Baby Saga. Essentially because the conflict with Baby is technically fairly early on because of how far-reaching it goes, from the machine mutants to the cult of Lude. That was all from technically the end of the 8th episode, so that kind of just leaves 7 build-up episodes. So for me, it just makes more sense to just say first 40 episodes, Baby Saga, next 7, Super 17, the last 17, Shadow Dragon Saga. Now that I've established what 3 terms I'm going to use for categorizing the storylines, gave you an example of what you can expect, I will be continuing part 2 and part 3 for the next 2 days. And like I said earlier, part 2 will be dedicated to classic Dragon Ball, and part 3 will be dedicated to Dragon Ball Z. I figured it would be a good idea to make it very clear, very streamlined about how I'm going to use these terms and what they are going to be defined as on this channel, to make it a lot easier on myself and viewers as we go forward with more videos dedicated to the Dragon Ball franchise. Thank you for tuning in to part 1, and I do hope you'll continue to look into part 2 and part 3 as well. Take care, and until next time.